Please stay close to me. Stay behind!
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick, Free State of Jones. Very unwieldy title, but there it is. Christy, Ben, Alonzo here. I didn't see it, but these guys did, and they will tell you everything you need to know.
Oh, am I doing Free State of Jones?
Please.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with this movie, and the end result is everything is wrong with this movie. It is, I guess, the true story, which is the mostly true story. It's a movie, so it can't be totally true, of a group of Confederate deserters and runaway slaves in Mississippi, Jones County being their home base, who live in the swamp and essentially serve as an insurrectionary, probably not a word, force against the Confederacy during the Civil War, realizing that because they are poor farmers and slaves, this is not fighting for the plantation rights of wealthy Southern plantation owners, is not their war. And so they slowly become a nuisance and then a legitimate fighting force against the South. They are led by Matthew McConaughey.
I'm tired of it.
You, me, all of us. We're all out there dying so they can stay rich. Tax collectors coming around here, taking everything. We have nothing for the winter.
Girls, you know how to shoot one of these?
It's quite normal you got there.
Last time I checked, the gun don't care who's pulling the trigger.
You know they shoot deserters, don't you?
They runaways?
Please shoot.
And gonna die so they can get rich selling their cotton. That's why we left them.
No man ought to tell another man what he's got to live for or what he's got to die for.
I don't have the patience with 5 or 6 deserters hiding out in a swamp.
You ready?
Just hang them.
See anything?
He's out there. He won't miss this.
This is a really well-made movie.
Right.
That, you know, everyone's good in it.
Everyone's good.
And
There's
it's
no
totally boring.
There's no scene that like is wrong. You know, it's just so slow and so boring, and doesn't build to anything. It's just a bunch of in fact, sometimes we just flash forward to battles, and you're like, oh, I guess they're out of the swamp and they're having a battle now. Like
Well, also, and what happens is, I think Gary Ross directed this and co-wrote it, I want to say, and he so clearly wants to include so much
that's right.
that he actually goes to archival photos and puts title cards on the screen saying, and then this happened, and then this battle happened, and like it's like jumping you ahead in time because the script itself cannot encompass everything that he is trying to achieve here, and the result just feels like weirdly like a slog. It's also too slow. Like it's got too much going on, but it's also too slow.
Yeah, they needed to focus on like maybe just Matthew McConaughey and his relationship that he has. I was unclear what his marital situation was.
Well, that's one of the many things that could have been really interesting here, and it's not. So
It's not, right.
he's married to Carrie Russell, and they have a little boy. In the beginning of the film, the baby is very sick. And so a friend of his suggests, I'm going to send my house slave over. She's a healer. She will fix it. And it's Gugu Mbatha-Raw. And she comes over and she helps the baby. And so they know each other. And then Carrie Russell leaves him.
But that's not even clear that it's really leaving him as opposed to...
She packs up their stuff.
I got it, but that could, to me, that was like, it's too dangerous here, and you're dangerous, so for the sake of the baby, I have to go. See you in 2 months or 2 years.
Right, she goes to Georgia, right.
I didn't get that was a full
bye-bye.
I'm leaving. Right.
I sensed vaguely that she was unhappy with how busy he was. Like he's got too much work.
You know,
he's at the office.
He's
a lot.
he took on everybody's cause. That's
Right.
that's his problem.
And so then he enters into this kind of vague relationship with Gugu and Mbatha-Raw, and I never believed that for a second. I did not feel a spark.
Nope.
You have two of the most charismatic people on the planet, and this movie completely saps them of anything that makes them attractive, not unlike our friend Chris Pratt in Jurassic World,
Oh, boy.
not unlike Oscar Isaac in the new X-Men. Like you have somebody who is magnetic and just has this electrifying screen presence, and individually and together, I felt nothing. And then the thing that they could have explored, and they don't, is when Carrie Russell comes back, and both women are living there simultaneously, and Gugu Mbatha-Raw she's pregnant, and Carrie Russell has Matthew McConaughey's baby. And they could have explored, like, what's the tension there? What's the dynamic there? And they just gloss over it.
What's that dinner table like?
Right.
Yeah, because
so,
I'm sure
how was your day?
So, like, it's
they
not
don't
like-
touch it at all. It could have been so interesting.
It's not like all the poor farmers who essentially desert. And there's an interesting moment when and they use the N-word, like, hey, you guys are also the N-word because somebody is the N-word to somebody, right? And so the point you're getting is that not here. Here, we're all nothing. We're all, and why are we fighting to protect this system that makes millionaires more millions? Right. This doesn't help us. What are we doing? Here's what we should get: our own land. And there's a bunch of good sort of low scale socialist stuff in there. The stuff that makes sense, not like, government taking over all industry, right? Not that kind of socialism. But still, these are Southerners. And later, we get a bunch of poor Southerners who still hate black people, as we know, right? But never here, except for one very brief scene, which they resolve with music, do we get what would have been the issue inside their little compound of, hey, there's still going to be racism here. Like, and there would have been racism or race, let's say that. Race would have played a role in that dynamic you were talking about with the family, like Carrie Russell and the white kid, and then the black kid, and how do we say her name?
Gugu Mbatha-Raw.
And Gugu Mbatha-Raw and the mixed race kid, like that. And the kid's relationship, is the kid going to embrace? None of that. Just they don't do any of that. There's one moment where in the camp, one deserter says, "Hey, you can't take our pork. You're a slave," And then Matthew McConaughey says, "No, he can. Play that violin, or there's going to be trouble." And that's it, And then that's and you're like, oh,
So is this a deal where like they didn't have time to establish the characters because there's so many events they're trying to cover historically?
They had time.
It's 2 hours and 19 minutes.
Yeah, they just
they're trying to cram in so much historically, I think. And also, Matthew McConaughey, we got to mention. Yes, he's Oscar winner Matthew McConaughey now, but he never gets out of his own way of being Matthew McConaughey. So there's one scene in particular that I laughed at because this little boy goes up to him at the camp and says, "Pardon me, sir, are you Newt Knight?" He goes, "All day."
Yeah, that's right.
And he's like 1 inch away from saying, all right. And he still has that delivery despite, he's emaciated and he's got the fur and the hair. And anyway,
There's a moment that I think, the last thing I'll say about this, that epitomizes what was wrong with, again, a movie that had no horrible scenes, but is going to do horribly and critics are going to hate it. So I thought sometimes using the mixing in the Civil War era photos was effective at times, but then we get a couple of shots, and so then we're into Reconstruction, right, or at least post Civil War, pre-Reconstruction, when there were methods used by the government in Mississippi to essentially maintain slavery, right, apprenticeships, which were just slavery by another name. And so we know that, and we see in the fields, because Gary Ross effectively shows us, look at this, 1 year after emancipation, and there's fields, and black people are still working the fields, and they still have to work the fields. What's different? But he puts emancipation in quotes. He goes, 1 year after emancipation, in case you don't get that it's not really emancipation. Like, we got it. That's the whole goddamn point. So nothing is subtle, nothing is left to the imagination, and nothing terribly interesting is deeply explored.
We got to mention also, there's this weird flash forward structure here and there. I totally forgot about it until just now. So out of nowhere at some point, They flash forward to a courtroom in, it's got to be like the late 1940s.
It's like 1949, I think.
It's 85 years after.
Yeah.
And so you have this man who's trying to marry his sweetheart, whatever, and he can't because he might be the descendant of Gugu Mbatha-Raw and Matthew McConaughey. So he might be an eighth black, and so he is in Mississippi in the 40s and can't marry who he wants. And so the back and forth time structure is like him, this guy who we don't know anything about. We have no connection to him at all.
So-
we have nothing
right.
invested in his fight.
Nothing. We don't
And
know his wife.
No.
We don't know anything.
Who
we
is
get,
he?
Like it's their point of going. And by the way, Mississippi was super racist in 1949.
Yeah.
Stop the press.
Still.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks for that little piece of information.
It's so jarring.
It's jarring. And then this guy who looks white because he's 7/8 white, presuming that he's descended from that line. Like who cares? Like, and then so when he takes a stand, the idea is that generationally the Newt Knight fighting spirit remains, I guess. But we don't care. We don't know him. We were at least invested in McConaughey.
Right. There's just nothing. There's nothing to
Oh,
it.
it's such a terrible
They don't
idea.
need and like the movie
They don't
is
need-
2 hours and 19 minutes long. They could have taken like the 19 minutes of courtroom scene stuff and just gotten rid of it entirely.
It's meaningless.
It's
Made it a
horrible.
title card at the
Meaningless.
end.
It's a mess. Yeah, who is this guy? Who cares? So my number is a 4.2 because it is well made, but a drag and a mess narratively. You?
Yeah, I originally was going to give it a 5, but it belongs under 5, so I'm going to give
All
it a 4.8, which will pull us to 4.5.
Okay, and it's at 15%. I leaned over to Ben in the middle of the movie. I'm like, what does this remind me of that we saw?
Oh, yeah, right.
Like where it's Liev Schreiber and Daniel Craig, and they're in the woods in the snow.
And I
like,
th- and I-
Defiance.
Defiance.
This
But
is like that. Like it's well made but boring.
But I said it was like The Way Back.
Which is also well made but boring.
Which is also well made
right.
but boring. And but I was thinking of Defiance, but I said The Way Back, but they're super similar. They're like war movies that you're like, oh man, how are we getting this wrong? How are we getting this wrong?
Don't see it.